Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining me. I'm now going to go and make sure I can share my screen here so that I can bring up some slides. So we have at least some pretty pictures and things like that to talk about. Yes, there we go. I can see my slides, so hopefully all of you can see my slides also. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me. In this particular talk, I'm going to cover kind of a range of subjects, which is why we named the particular topic Growing Together in the Neurocloud. And I'll get into the whole idea of what Neurocloud means, but really, what we're going to focus on is just a whole bunch of things to really show that being neurodistinct, which is the term I use, and we'll talk about some more, doesn't make you really different in your needs than what all the rest of humans are. Actually, we're all humans, and we all really have the same needs, just some of us have more than others do. But it really should bring us together and not be something that's a dividing point. So hopefully we can illustrate that as we go. So let me see if I can make my clicker work and advance through the slides, and we will dive in. And please feel free to drop things into the chat that's available, and I will try to do the best I can to answer things as we go along. And if I miss them, we'll just catch them at the end. I want to make sure we have a little room for question and answer. I will admit, as you probably see in my name, I am autistic, which while I can function relatively well, I'm really not great at paying attention to what I'm going to say and reading the chat all at the same time, but I will do my absolute best to try and catch any questions that you do put down there. Oh, let's see here. Oh gosh, all this technology stuff all at once. There we go. So I'm going to start out with just a little bit of a story that I think will help maybe illustrate what I mean by we all come at things in different ways, and we all have different ways that we interact and perceive with the world, but I often don't understand how other people are doing it. So this is a story that comes out of my real life, and my wife and I, we've been married nearly 40 years coming up, so we've had a fair amount of time together. I used to, like most autistics, not used to, still do actually, but I was on a kick of eating the same thing for quite a long time, and the kick at the time happened to be roast beef sandwiches on potato bread, which definitely is not, I would say, the health kick. My doctor said I should cut down on the red meat, but hey, they tasted really, really good. And of course, it couldn't be just any potato bread. It had to be a specific brand of potato bread. So my wife and I would go shopping together. That's our norm. We go do it together. And we'd walk into the particular store that we would shop at. And this store was notorious for never putting the same thing in the same place twice. And I would be looking for my bread, and I would be looking at the end of the wrapper and looking for the brand name of the bread that I wanted. And my wife, while I'm looking for brand name, would almost inevitably just point and go, honey, it's right over there. And I'd walk over sheepishly, and of course, she was always right. So after about 1.5 years of this, I finally asked her, how is it that you can just step in the aisle and point right to my bread every single time, long before I can even find where the section is that has my brand? And I read pretty quick. And what she said to me really illuminated the whole fact of the different ways that we think, but we often can't recognize somebody else's way, because if we don't think that way, how are we going to recognize it? And what she said was, if you just look at the end of your wrapper of your bread, it's got a orange circle on the end of the wrapper. And that was her whole secret. She wasn't reading the words, which is where I thought all the information lived. She was just looking for an identifying mark. And my wife is neurodistinct. She has ADHD and is a very highly visual person. So for her, She just wanted an identifying mark. She didn't need to know it was XYZ brand. She just needed to know it was the right package. And the orange circle was the right package. So she would just look, she'd see the orange circle, and bam, there it is. She found my bread for me. Very, very different ways to perceive and process the world. I'm perceiving it through words as being where meaning lives. She's perceiving it through identifying factors, in this case, an orange circle. But I did finally win. It wasn't with the bread. We were in the same store, and we were shopping for her favorite coffee. And we walk down through the aisle. We get to the end of the aisle. She comes up to me. I got there a little bit quicker. And she says to me, honey, I think we need to go to a different store because they don't have my coffee here anymore. And I reach up and I grab the box and I hand it to her. So how is it that I was able to find this box of coffee that she couldn't? Well, they rebranded. It no longer had the identifying mark she was looking for. The colors of the box changed. They put pictures where it used to be solid colors, all those kind of things. But the wording did not change. Different font, but it still said the same brand name, and it's also said the exact same variety. So in this case, by looking for the information in the words, I was able to find what she couldn't find because she was looking for an image that she had in her mind, and the package no longer met that image. Well, we went through a lot of our marriage. I was diagnosed at 54. She was diagnosed a few years later. So we went through much of our marriage together, not having a clue that we were perceiving the world very differently. And it would often lead to some pretty major conflicts. But now that we understand, we work and use whoever's strength is the most appropriate one for solving the particular problem. And we know when it's finding things by names where you got to read the text, that's my strength. If it's identifying something that has a unique look, that is her strength. So very different ways of perceiving, but both human ways of perceiving. And the important thing is, it doesn't matter that we happen to be neurodistinct, autism, and ADHD. This is also prevalent across all of humans. You can take neurotypicals, and they will use different ways to perceive. Some may be the picture-oriented, some may be the word-oriented. Maybe there's other methods that I don't understand yet. So always important to consider that other people are going to bring a perspective that may be very unique to your particular perspective. Let's see, where's my little clicker here? There we go. So I often will say that, as we're peeking into this, when we're talking about neurodiversity is a very, very wide subject, and it includes a lot of groups that we refer to, or I refer to, as the neurodistinct, and we just illustrate some of those here, ADHD, autism, anxiety. I don't think we've all come to an agreement of everything that fits into being the neurodistinct. But what I didn't put up here is neurodiversity also includes all other humans. But I'm going to be looking at this from the perspective of an autistic individual because that's the only perspective I personally have. Now, I try to learn and adopt other people's perspectives, but being autistic, my natural perspective is obviously an autistic perspective. So neurodiversity, I like to make things really simple. I think we make this so complicated that a normal person has a challenge explaining neurodiversity in a way that the person that's listening doesn't either check out or just not understand what it is. So this is my simplified manner of explaining what neurodiversity is. If we just take a look at eyes and consider eyes on humans, we have all different colors. We have different shapes. There's blue eyes, there's brown eyes, there's green eyes, there's rounded eyes, there's more almond-shaped eyes. And we consider all of those to be absolutely normal. We don't go and say, oh, those blue-eyed people, they're just such a way when those people are those blue-eyed people. And I can pick on them. I do have blue eyes. So, but we consider that all normal. We don't consider that being abnormal to be blue-eyed or brown-eyed or to have rounded eyes or whatever. But what we often don't think about is brains. And brains, often people will say, it is the most complex item in the universe that we know. We certainly don't understand how it really works. It's definitely more complex than eyes, but we don't think about the fact that if eyes can vary as much as they do, why can't brains vary that much? And the reality is brains do vary that much and more. So neurodiversity is very simply the concept that human brains do have a whole range of ways that they vary. It can be the thickness of the cortical layers. It can be where the folds are. It can be the amount of white connective tissue between it in different areas. There is a whole, plethora of different ways that brains can differ. And we further believe in the neurodiversity realm that depending upon your particular brain, you are going to have a particular style of perceiving, processing, and thinking about the world. And in a nutshell, that is neurodiversity, the concept that brains and humans vary between humans, and that is normal. And that normal variation gives us different ways of perceiving, processing, and thinking. Now, the medical community likes to come in and put us all into tight categories and say that this thinking type brain is this and this thinking type brain is that. Whereas in the neurodiversity community, we just like to recognize that there's differences, and oftentimes trying to make these really fine groupings of it's this one versus that one really doesn't matter, to be honest with you. It's recognizing that there are huge differences, and those differences cause as much difference in looking for bread by reading the words versus looking at the overall image as anything else. And again, very, very normal. So I like to use pictures because to me, pictures, they say, gives it 1,000 words. I'm going to save myself 1,000 words and save you having to listen to me for 1,000 words, and we're going to use a picture. So this is just another way to look at neurodiversity, and I created this concept called the Neurocloud. And why did I come up with the Neurocloud? I think far too often when we speak about neurodiversity, that people think neurodiversity is talking about those people. And however you want to categorize those people, they're really saying there's a group that falls into neurodiversity, but there's a lot of us that don't. Well, I think that is completely untrue, and I'll give another example coming up of why I think that's untrue if we compare it to other styles of diversity. So in my mind, I wanted to somehow illustrate that all humans are part of neurodiversity. So I came up with the Neurocloud. So the idea in the Neurocloud is we have all humans in there, and humans have a range of human traits. And I don't think that there's such a thing as an autism trait or an ADHD trait or an OCD trait, or pick whatever particular condition you want. I think those are all human traits, because I know plenty of people who would not fall under the ADHD banner that are disorganized, have problems starting, they're just kind of a mess, but they're pretty neurotypical in most other manners. So we couldn't say that that of being disorganized or not being able to get started or completed on their projects an ADHD only trait. It's a human trait. Might be at a higher level in some groups or a lower level in other groups, but it's true across all groups. So idea in Neurocloud is all humans are in there, and we're only dealing with human traits. So the way you interpret this thing is each one of those circles is just representing a human, and each color is a particular trait, and kind of the size and the brightness of the color is giving an indication of how prevalent that particular trait is for that human we're representing. And I think neurotypical ends up being this one segment in the cloud. And the reason I use the cloud analogy is clouds kind of move and mix around. It's hard to find a firm border between them, but very often there's one area that's really dark. There's other areas that are lighter. There might be one area where rain is coming down out of that cloud. And that, I think, is very much how we tend to group together as humans within this group of the Neurocloud of all humans, there's different areas that aren't distinguished with a sharp cutoff between them. They're all mixed together just like a cloud is. So you can see that blue line in the top left area, kind of around a group that has somewhat similar characteristics. They have human traits at a somewhat similar mix of levels. All humans, whether they are in the neurotypical or the neurodistinct category, are individuals. And we have to recognize that just because I'm autistic doesn't mean that the next autistic you meet is going to be at all like me. Hopefully, God forbid that they are like me, because I think probably one of me is enough for the world. The same thing with neurotypicals, though. One neurotypical is not the same as the next neurotypical. So when we're talking about these categories, we're talking in broad stereotypes, with recognizing that within that, there are only individuals who will possibly, have a range of the stereotypical attributes, but not necessarily all of them, but still fall within that category. Now, if we cross over that blue line, we go into the area I call neurodistinct. And neurodistinct, the term that a lot of people will use instead is neurodivergent. Now, I personally am not a fan of neurodivergent, which is why I came up with the term neurodistinct. Neurodivergent, to me, has a lot of negative connotation around it, and a whole lot of reasons why it wouldn't be used as a word in marketing to go out and sell a product. So I was out hiking. I live here in Colorado, right by the foothills, so I do a lot of hiking, and maybe this was because of lack of oxygen due to the altitude we're at that this came to me. But for whatever reason, it did come to me. I was trying to come up with a different term to use, but I wanted it to have ND, because we often talk about NT for neurotypical and ND for neurodivergent as people used it, but I wanted a different term that could fit under ND. And neurodistinct popped in my mind. And the reason I liked it and it works for me is I never wanted to be divergent. Divergent to me has the connotation that there's a norm that is correct, and that then there is things that are not right, and that's the divergent group. Well, I don't think that I'm not right. I certainly know that I look at things a little differently, but I think in many cases, like looking for bread, my way could be a very, very strong and useful manner. And in many other things, my perspective may provide a insight into the issue that other perspectives aren't quite giving. So I came up with the term neurodistinct because I think most of us somewhere in our life would like to be distinct in something that we do. And it may be distinct in our family, it may be distinct in our careers, may be distinct in the hobbies we do, but we do like to be distinct. So to me, neurodistinct is putting a much better light than neurodivergent, which a lot of people who don't know the term divergent, to them, they think of deviant. And well, my high school and junior high and elementary principal might have told you I was a deviant. I don't think of myself as a deviant. I think of myself as being distinct. So that is where the term neurodistinct came from, and why I personally use the term neurodistinct, and it's getting a fair amount of traction. But if you identify as being neurodivergent and you tell me that, I am going to respect your decision and refer to you as neurodivergent. If we think about it, though, I have a good friend, Jim Hogan, and the way Jim likes to put it is, would you go up to a human and say that you're physically divergent? As he says, I think you'd get punched in the face if you did that. So why should we go up and tell somebody that they're neurodivergent? Let's tell them that they're neurodistinct. They have a unique distinction that stands out, that makes them special in their own unique ways. So that is the Neurocloud. A couple little takeaways from the Neurocloud are, A, that blue line should not be a firm line. I think that there's a gradient between there because, again, this is a mix of different traits that are all human traits. So you may have some that put you a little further to one side than the other, but you get my lousy artwork, and I don't know how to draw a gradient in this picture, so it's a line. But really, it's not just a sharp cutoff where one side is neurodistinct and one side is neurotypical. I think that there are people who are functionally neurodistinct, functionally autistic, functionally ADHD, meaning they may not pass the criteria of the medical world, but the way they perceive, process, and think makes them fit in most comfortably and relate best to that particular group. And if they fit in and relate to that group best, they probably struggle with a lot of what that group struggles with also. So that is one good thing about the Neurocloud concept. The other thing is the further apart you are in the Neurocloud, even if you're in the same area, in the neurotypical area or the neurodistinct area, the more challenging communication is going to be with that other person because they think less like you do as you move further and further apart. And if you have to go over that line that should be a gradient, it's even like adding extra distance because now the person perceives, processes, thinks in a very, very different manner than you do. Another thing that's real interesting, I think, in the Neurocloud is I think we over-assign the number of people that fall into neurotypical. As you saw in the last picture, neurotypical was kind of that top right quadrant. Well, there's a lot, I think, of neurodistinct individuals that can be influenced by the neurotypicals because I think neurotypicals are very cohesive as a group. So when somebody says this is the way it is, they just kind of get on board and agree. And I'm not saying that's bad. We probably wouldn't have civilization if people didn't manage to agree what norms would be. But I think that the neurotypicals, with their cohesion and their persuasion and influence, are able to take people who do see the world differently and get them to agree to look at it the way they're proposing, even though they themselves don't see it that way. So I think that this picture of the Neurocloud is how a lot of us think it really is, that most people are neurotypical and there's some of us that are neurodistinct. But the reality is, I think this picture is really more realistic, that the neurotypicals, I don't have a firm study on it, but my guess is 35–40% of the world's probably neurotypical, and the rest of us functionally neurodistinct. So this picture, I think, is much more accurate as far as how it appears. The other one is more accurate as far as who we really are, if we were willing to not be persuaded and influenced by others as to what we would agree to. Talking about neurodiverse and neurodiversity and why it is that everybody, I think, fits into it, I like to use a example that came from a good friend of mine who will be on a panel tomorrow with me, Dr. Lutza Ireland in Australia. And Dr. Lutza is both ADHD and autistic, and she uses the example of biodiversity to help define the words. So we take along the top row here, we have the concept, and I'm just going to do the two outer ones. Diversity follows a very similar path, but we'll just simplify it for the moment. Concept of biodiversity, of course, deals with ecosystems and what kind of plants and animals and living beings and such are in it. Neurodiversity deals with humans and the way that they perceive, process, and think. Just like biodiversity is all living things, neurodiversity is all humans. When we go and look at the mix of them, the term that we use in biodiversity is we say a particular environment, a particular ecosystem is either biodiverse or it's not biodiverse. If it's got a whole mix of things like in the Amazon, it's going to be quite biodiverse. If we go into some other areas where there is only maybe a field planted in the Midwest with a monoculture of corn, that is not very biodiverse. Virtually everything is identical. So neurodiverse would really work the same way. Neurodiverse is, it's very neurodiverse if we have a whole mix of different types of humans in there that have different ways of thinking. And it's not neurodiverse if we have all of the same. So if we have all neurotypicals, that's not neurodiverse. If we have all autistics, that's not neurodiverse. So point being, biodiverse and neurodiverse talk about ecosystems or groups. Neurodiverse should be talking about groups also. An individual can't be neurodiverse because they're only one. So that's where we go to the entity portion. And when we're talking about biodiverse, the entities we might talk about, and obviously there's a lot more than I put on here, but trees, flowers, an oak, a rose, if we want to be more specific, are the entities that make up biodiversity. If we have a whole mix of different types of trees, a whole mix of different types of animals, we then have a biodiverse system, but the animal is not biodiverse by itself, or the tree is not biodiverse. And correspondingly, when we go into neurodiversity, we have a couple categories, the two big ones, neurotypical, neurodistinct, and we have individual categories that we can break it into, just like we can take trees and break it into oaks and aspens and birches and such. We can take the neurodistinct and break it into ADHD and autism and dyslexia and all of those different things. So an individual isn't neurodistinct, or excuse me, an individual is not neurodiverse. An individual could be neurodistinct. If we wanted to be more specific, I am a autistic individual inside of the world of neurodiversity. And a person could be neurotypical. And we don't have divisions within neurotypical, but we should, because there is a huge amount of variation in neurotypicals. So hopefully we can get it that I won't have to ever hear again somebody saying that I'm a neurodiverse person, because that would be like saying that I'm a neurodiverse oak tree. Excuse me, that would be biodiverse, wouldn't it? Yeah, that would be a biodiverse oak tree, which doesn't make sense. It just doesn't fit together. So the words should parallel and fit together, seeing as they're the same concepts. So let's hopefully get onto using good terms so everybody understands what we're talking about. So neurodistinct people, I think probably most of you attending here, have an idea what neurodistinct people are, but oftentimes we don't recognize that there are a huge amount of neurodistinct people that are in the world that are actually out doing things and being successful. And when we look here, I just gave 3 categories. Of course, in the neurodistinct, there's far more categories. And I think that there's even this large category that is unnamed. The medical world hasn't gotten to giving it a name yet. It's just people that think in a definitely different way of perceiving, processing, and thinking that doesn't match the norm. Sometimes maybe we would just call them artists, as an example. Not to pick on artists, but just saying there's a group that very frequently does perceive the world in a different manner, but we don't try and medicalize the fact that they are able to bring that out in different art forms. But when we look at these, we can see autistic, Dan Aykroyd, actor, comedian. Most people, when you say autistic, they think tech geek. Well, I don't think either of the Dan or Greta are tech geeks by any means. They certainly know how to use technology, but we could have put tech geeks up there instead. We could have put Elon Musk up, who was obviously a tech geek and has admitted to being autistic. ADHD, we have Richard Branson, seems to have done okay for himself. And Simone Biles is actually ADHD also. So again, people that we don't necessarily think of. And last one, Tim Tebow, might not be the most popular player these days, but is one that I found a picture of pretty quick, and does openly admit to being dyslexic. Whoopi Goldberg is also dyslexic. And as a matter of fact, Richard Branson should be in that column too, but I didn't want him to, hog everything just because he's, some rich dude that owns a pile of companies. We'll keep him in one column. So neurodistinct people are all over the world, and we often don't recognize them. And that's one of the problems in companies, is we have so many companies who think they have to go start some program and go hire neurodistinct individuals. That they want geeks, they hire autistic individuals. And if they want creative types, they hire ADHD individuals. When the reality is, these people are already in their company and they often don't recognize it and don't support them in a way that allows them to get the best out of what these people can bring to them with their unique perspectives, their unique way of perceiving, processing, and thinking. So this is one of my real fun ones I love to do. Just go ahead and throw in the chat if you can. What is it that you see in this picture? So I'll give a few seconds here for people to drop something into the chat of what do you see? Oh, come on. Somebody's got to see something in the picture. Okay, we got a horse with a frog head, which is pretty good because that picks up both elements. We have a frog. Oh, it says new message. I guess I got to click my little button here and see what the next new message down is. Oh, yeah, there we go. We got a sad horse. We got frog, frogs, horses. So the answer is you're all right. There is a frog and there is a horse in here. And if you can't pick up one or the other, the frog is actually up here in this top section in the yellow, kind of my cursor is highlighting it now. And the horse, the frog becomes the face of the horse, and the mane is down here in the blue area. And that is the horse. If you tip your head to the right or to the left, you can see one sometimes easier than the other. But the interesting question really is, we were just all looking at the exact same image at the exact same time, and we came away with two distinct, different concepts of what was in this picture. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, what you perceived is what you are convinced is there. So just think that we're in a meeting, and the meeting is having a discussion going on, and somebody says something, and your interpretation is interpretation A. You interpreted the world of frogs as what they're talking about, and the other person or other people in the room interpreted it as being the world of horses they were talking about. Well, no matter how much you try and dispute and debate the two different topics, until you both can agree that there are horses and frogs in the picture, you're having one-sided debates that will never allow the other person to see the perspective. So, important point to take away from here is we all have our unique perspectives, and we have to be willing to accept and ask and actually get from other people their perspective so that we can understand what all is going on, because our perspective will distort to what we're looking for. If you're looking for the frog, you'll see the frog. If you're looking for the horse, you'll see the horse. And a few of you were pretty good and caught both parts in there. So, I'd say I want you in the meeting because you can see both sides, and that would be super, super helpful if we're trying to come to a conclusion on what to do or how to proceed with something. So what is a diagnosis? I think this is something else that is just a kind of personal pet peeve of mine, is we go about using these diagnoses to define who people are. But if we work our way backwards to what is a diagnosis, how does it come about? This isn't like detecting cancer where they do a pathology on it and they look at the cell and identify it's a certain type of cancer, or it's COVID. They take and use the swab or whatever, and they do DNA tests on it and they can say yes, there is COVID in there. The diagnosis is all based off of this thing called the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders. So the first thing is thinking differently a mental health disorder? Well, if you're in the medical world, it is, but if you're out in the general population, I don't think it's necessarily a disorder. I think it's just a different way to see the world, just like we have from very many groups of different ways of having to see the world. And, look at politics. Obviously, we're in the US in an election cycle. We have people talking about the exact same topic and seeing it in very, very different ways. And so we're going to say that one's mentally sick, or, both are mentally, have disorders because they see it differently? I don't think so. I think that's the nature of humans, of perceiving and processing and thinking differently. So we have this DSM. How does the DSM diagnoses come about? Well, unfortunately, too many of them have come about based on studying of children. And what fits in a child does not necessarily fit in an adult. So when we're trying to diagnose the more common neurodistinct conditions of autism and ADHD and dyslexia, we are often looking at the way that it would appear in a 5 or 6 year old, and not only a 5 or 6 year old, but frequently a male 5 or 6 year old, which may not be how it appears in other categories of individuals. So we take this definition that some committee gets together, and over a couple years they argue back and forth and come up with this list of how we're going to define it based upon, unfortunately, not the regular whole population, but usually a subset. Then we either go and create this test, a test instrument that has about a bazillion questions, or you go in and you see a specialist in this who talks to you and listens to you, or maybe they do a combination of both. And if you get a particular score on the test instrument, then they say you have this condition. And if you miss that by a couple points, then they're going to say you don't have this condition. But I think that is also very misleading. Now, for the medical world, it may be a great thing, but for us humans out dealing in the real world, if somebody is very, very close to being, say, an ADHD diagnosis, they're off by a few points on the test instrument, does that mean that they don't have many of the same challenges? And the answer is no, they do have many of the same challenges. So is that arbitrary cutoff realistic? Or is this like being a functional alcoholic? You're still an alcoholic, you're just able to get by in the world a little bit better. So maybe we have functional ADHD and functional autism. I think we do. And those people suffer with many of the same challenges, but they may not have them quite at the intensity or the ones that are quite as obvious that it draws attraction to it. So the whole point being, when we get all done and said, a diagnosis is just somebody's arbitrary judgment that you fall into some classification that a bunch of humans dreamed up out of nowhere, because there is no test to say with definitive answer, like you can test for DNA in certain diseases, you can test for presence of certain viruses or bacteria and other diseases. There is none of that. It's somebody deciding you fall in a category that a bunch of humans went and created. So I think that we get a little too hung up on, is it a diagnosis or not? I think we can look at this like we do in many social things of, is that a way that I identify with, that I resonate with that group, and I tend to perceive, process, think, and interact with that group very strongly? Maybe that's the group I fit into. I mean, it's very interesting if we compare this to the LGBTQ plus groups. Do we go through and tell them that they have to be diagnosed to be LGBTQ plus, or any of those particular things? Or do they get to decide by themselves that they fit best into one of those categories and that's who their people are? Well, obviously, we've moved to that second point. If we go back into, it was in 72, I believe, that they took being gay used to be considered a psychological disorder that we had to go fix. Well, we now recognize that it's not a psychological disorder. It's a way that somebody identifies. It's a way that somebody perceives, processes, and thinks about the world and who they like to interact most closely with. I think someday we may get to that same point where we stop medicalizing all of the different ways humans can think, and we simply recognize that humans tend to be attracted to people who are like themselves because we feel understood. So diagnosis to me is just an opinion, and your opinion of who you fit in is probably as, if not more accurate than the opinion of somebody who doesn't know you, who wants $3,000 to tell you what category you fit into. Unfortunately, to get extra support and services, you often have to go through that mind-numbing routine of getting categorized. So why is it that we sometimes have big challenges understanding neurodistinct conditions? Well, if we look at the top of this particular chart, this is how most medical things work in neurodistinct. I got the X through it because I don't think it works that way. The way it works in most conditions, let's just say a cold. We have a very, low-grade cold. You got some sniffles. You're not feeling perfect, but you can get through the day. Or you have a very severe cold where you have huge amounts of congestion, maybe a little bit of challenge in breathing. You feel just totally miserable, and you have no desire to do much of anything but roll over and hide under the covers. And that is how most medical conditions work. They work on a continuum of going from, a low level of that to a high level. We have, a stage 1 cancer through a stage 4 cancer. So that is most conditions. Unfortunately, that is not how things work when we're looking at neurodistinct conditions, because neurodistinct conditions are a mixture of a whole bunch of different traits that can appear at different levels in any particular person. And when you have a large enough grouping of enough of these human traits at a high enough intensity, we then say that you have this particular condition. But we can't put you on a scale that goes from low to high, because what is, and I'm just going to use autism because that's what I have. What is a high-functioning autistic? Does that give you any clue what it is you're going to deal with? And the answer is no. You may get me, who can converse quite well. If you were sitting here, I would be looking you in the eye just like I'm looking at the camera, and I have no problem talking in real time. Now, I certainly do have plenty of challenges. When we look in the bottom here, those 3 charts, and I know you can't read the little tiny words around each one of those charts, but I'll tell you what they are. It's something I came up with to try and express the different ways that a person would show up, so that you have a better idea of what is it that you're going to be dealing with in an individual. And this works very well, actually, with neurotypicals, with neurodistincts. It's very, very interesting. And I just call it, the illustration of your traits. So I broke it into 3 categories. I broke it into communication area, which is the leftmost block. The traits are in the middle. That's just kind of things that didn't classify in anything else. And social interaction stuff is on the right-hand side. And let's just take and focus in on the communication, the left-hand one. And these are my particular interactional indicators, to be honest with you. So I'm not using somebody else, I'm using my own. And when you look at the communication, the way you interpret all of them is, the more blue underneath a particular area, the more challenged that particular area is. The less blue, the easier that area is. So when you look in the communication one, well, I've been talking to you now for half an hour-ish or so, and hopefully I've been able to string together a few words and a few sentences and be able to, actually make some sense out of what I'm saying. So you would probably say my communication abilities are relatively strong. But when we go and look at my communication interactional indicator, you can see I have a number of areas where I don't struggle. And those areas that I don't struggle are my outward communication. But I have a number of areas that I struggle a huge amount in. And that's my inward communication. I am not really good at picking up those nuances, the social cues, the different twists and turns in a conversation by using facial language and tonality. So that's where I struggle. And that is why it makes it so hard to understand, because it's not high or low ADHD or autism or dyslexia. It's a combination of different traits at different intensities, and every individual is going to show a different mix. If you remember back when you were younger, maybe, or maybe you still do, I don't know, there was this game called Pickup Sticks, and it had a whole bunch of different colored sticks, and I don't even remember how you played the game. I think you dumped them out and tried to pull them out without disturbing the pile, but I won't swear to that's how you played it, but I do remember having them. But if we were to all grab our own handful of pickup sticks, and imagine those pickup sticks, each color represents a different human trait, and we grab a handful, we're all going to get a different handful. And some we're going to have more of one human trait and less of another human trait. So again, this is just another way to illustrate that idea of that interactional indicator, that everybody can have a completely different mix of traits, and they still are all human traits. They still are human, even though they bring unique ways to perceive, process, and think. I'm not going to read through this whole chart, but I went and hunted up, we talk about what is the prevalence of these different conditions. If you go and add these up, and these came from the clevelandclinic.org, the way they expressed them, they had it with different bases, so I just made them all into percentages so they were easy to add up. We end up with over 50% of the population has some condition that we would think falls under neurodistinct. Now, we recognize there can be co-occurrence. I actually have anxiety disorder along with autistic. So that reduces it some, but there's a lot of traits I didn't put on here. So if we're over 50%, is neurotypical an illusion? It goes back to what I showed in the Neurocloud. I think neurotypical is a small group that's influential, but the reality is we're much different in the ways we perceive, process, and think in the real world. But what does it really matter what condition you may or may not have? Because it really comes down to behavior. Is there a behavior that's causing a problem in a particular situation? Now, I do most of my stuff in the workplace. That's kind of where I focus. And let's say we have somebody who interrupts in meetings. Well, does it matter whether they interrupt in a meeting because they're autistic and they're not sure where to break in, or they interrupt because they're a narcissist and it has to be about them and they need to talk, or they interrupt because they had bad parents that never taught them good manners? The answer is, it doesn't matter. The solution of the problem is we have to talk about their bad behavior in the meeting that is interrupting the meeting. Now, how we solve it may differ depending upon what the reason is, but it makes it very easy to approach because we can simply address the behavior and say, hey, this behavior is creating an issue. So what is neurodiversity and how does it fit in diversity? I think that neurodiversity is the superset of all diversity. When we look at diversity, we divide people up by these visible traits. When we look at neurodiversity, we say it's all these cognitive traits. But when we get down to it, what's the difference between these different groups? Is it the fact that some have light skin and dark skin and some have different chromosomes and some grew up in one culture versus another culture? I don't think those are the markers that make the difference. I think what's unique about each group and the value of every group is they bring a unique perspective. And the more perspectives we can gather, the better the decision we can make. And if that is true, that diversity is really based on the unique perspectives, not the outward markers, then guess what? Neurodiversity is the superset, because neurodiversity is defined by the unique way we perceive, process, and think, or our unique perspectives. So neurodiversity is diversity as far as I see it. 3 channels of communication. I'm not going to get into this one too deep because we could go on this for hours and hours and we're starting to run out of time. So I want to leave a few minutes to talk about some other stuff, but just real quickly, I am convinced most people, or a lot of people, use both words, tonality in their voice, and facial expressions to communicate. And if for some reason you don't pick them up, like myself, I pick up the words but not the rest. When my boss one time was talking to me in a meeting and said, Tim, I think you should find a new job, I took that as being I was going to be fired, which wouldn't have been a first time for me at all. But what I found out after we brought in HR, because I thought that'd be the thing to do if you're getting fired, is what she really meant was, Tim, I think this job is being overly stressful on you, and maybe another role would suit you better. But what they told me was she expressed that in her tonality of a caring tone, but her words were very direct in the way I interpreted the words. The direct words were, Tim, you should look for a new job. Conversely, I now put tonality and such in my voice because I was trained, but many people will speak without a lot of tonality and emotionality in their voice. But because people are expecting it, they manufacture it for you. And if you don't have tonality in your voice, they think that you're disconnected. And if you don't have facial expressions, look at them, interact with them that way, they decide that you're just disconnected and checked out. And that's not at all what you mean. But they go and they impute that into your communication because they would have those pieces in there. So just real brief, but again, this could be a whole seminar all on its own. Another term I like to use very often because, yes, I have been talked to about it many times, and my wife told me that getting my tone corrected saved our marriage. So it has better places than just in work. Having a good tone can be very, very beneficial for you. But beach, I like to use the term beach because it's simple. If I say the word beach, I think most of you have some image that comes to your mind. And usually it's like the one on the right, tropical, warm water, palm trees. I grew up in upstate New York, which gateway to the Adirondacks. Canada was closer to me than New York City. I was a Boy Scout. I did a lot of canoeing. And one time I stayed on an island that took about 8 minutes to walk all the way around it, circular beach. And that's my beach I think of. And it was in fresh water, had pine trees on it, surrounded by mountains and forests, as opposed to that tropical beach. Now, if we were just at work and I said, I'm going to the beach this weekend, and you said, well, take some sunscreen and be careful around the water and don't drown, that's probably good advice no matter what beach we go to. But if we have to do a project about the beach, we better figure out that my beach is full of fresh water and your beach is full of salt water, because that's probably going to be pertinent to the beach. So very important that just because we have a word that sounds simple doesn't mean everybody understands it the same. Here's another example of that same kind of thing. The way this one came up was my wife showed me a video that was on, I don't know, TikTok or something, and a woman sitting in front of the sign with a police officer outside her window, and she's pointing at the sign saying, but it says fine for parking. And the police officer is looking at her like she has 3 heads and came from an alien world, because obviously he's thinking fine, like you're going to have to pay for parking here because you shouldn't be. And she's thinking fine, like, hey, it's okay. It's perfectly fine. And perspective made all the difference. The law officer is thinking about it from the law and order sense. The other person, the woman, happens to be thinking about it from fine, meaning, you tell to your kids, hey, fine if you do that. Perfectly okay. So again, very, very careful. This is where we often have problems with communication between different people, no matter whether it's standard diversity, neurodiversity. And again, I think they're the same because we interpret the words differently. Another one that I really, really enjoyed was I was out at a conference. I bought this bag of potato chips. I'm eating it. I opened the top because, of course, you have to open only the top. And I had it upside down with, the top facing me, the bottom away from me, label facing up. So I'm reading it upside down. And I notice on it, it says no certified synthetic colors. And in my mind, it pops in my mind, I go, hallelujah, man, all these colors that are in here are the good old-fashioned non-certified type. I don't think that's what they meant. I think what they meant to say was certified, no synthetic colors. Because very, very different between certified no synthetic colors and no certified synthetic colors. No certified synthetic colors. You can have all the synthetic colors you want. You just got to make sure they're those illegal. You cannot, you're not supposed to use certified kinds. But it's not saying that there's no synthetic colors. So question is, this is a fairly large chain that sold them. How many hundreds of thousands of bags of these chips did they sell, thinking that they were saying one thing when really they said something completely different? Well, I'm going to kind of jump ahead some, because I talked a lot, and I really want to just get to this end thing here of talking about disclosing real fast. I think disclosing is something that you need to do for two reasons. One, if you disclose ahead of time and something comes up, people may think, oh, that's because Tim's autistic that he did whatever. But if you say afterwards, I did that because I'm autistic, they think it's an excuse. Secondly, if we don't stand up and start disclosing who we are, we're never going to get to the point of being recognized that we already are in the workplace. We already are in the community. So we have to be bold and stand up and be willing to say, this is who I am. It worked for the LGBTQ plus group of finally standing up for themselves. It will work for us when enough of us finally stand up. But remember, disclosing is not a free pass. You don't get by of being able to do whatever you want because you disclosed. You still need to fit in and be respectful and treat everybody with the respect and dignity that all humans are due. So that is the end, and I have a little free gift for you here if you want. You can go and take my little free course, which includes in it now AI Timbot. So I went and took a whole pile of my work. I went and trained one of those large language model clones on it, and you can ask questions and you will get answers in my tone and my thoughts and my concepts. So feel free to try it out. Take a picture of the QR code with your phone or take a screenshot, or if you want, write down that tiny URL. So that is what I have for you. I'll leave that up if anybody wants to copy that. But if we have a few minutes, if anybody wants to ask a question, feel free, either drop it in or yes, I'm looking forward to it also, Sue. Sue actually leads a group down in Broward County training individuals to get career skills. And I talk to normally each one of her classes at the end about getting employment, and she does phenomenal work. So thank you, Sue. I look forward to it. And I have a unique twist for them this time. I ran into some very, very interesting resource. So again, if there's any questions, feel free. And you can always go to my website. My website is just timgoldstein.com and get a lot of others of my materials. There's a contact page there you can use to contact me. And I do public speaking and awareness speaking and training and such to companies, corporations, groups like Sue's, nonprofits, all of those kind of things. So if I could be of help in some of those ways, please do reach out, and I would love to help you out however I can. And I think with that, we have hit the end of the hour that they gave us. So thank you very much. I appreciate you all coming, and hopefully you got some good information and maybe some new terms that we can use that we can make us all sound like, we really want to be thought of as being distinct, unique people, not being deviants that are somehow disconnected from the norm.